Hi everyone, I'm Cornelius of Voice Studio East, and this is the 8th episode of my beginner singing course. Last time we practiced the first verse of Amazing Grace with an emphasis on warmth and openness in the sound. This time we will tackle the second verse, but an octave up and in falsetto. If you're just joining us now, you might want to check out the previous video first, but it is not strictly necessary, especially if you don't mind starting the song at the second verse. As before, we will start by zoning in on each individual phrase in isolation and then tie them together at the end. The first phrase goes like this. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear. You may have noticed that I sang the first note in chest voice and only switched to falsetto for the subsequent note. This is because falsetto, especially when sung softly, has a tendency to become overly dull and weak in the low range. Therefore, when singing notes below E4, even if it is a soft passage, we should ideally avoid falsetto if it is feasible to do so. We thus have a very apt occasion to practice switching between chest voice and falsetto. As most of you probably know, such a switch usually results in a funny-sounding voice crack that interrupts the continuity of the phrase. There are a few different ways of making smooth transitions between chest voice and falsetto without producing a voice crack, but one thing they all have in common is that they are fairly advanced. Thus, for now, we will simply disguise the voice crack by the use of what I like to call the consonant trick. Certain consonants lead to a complete cessation of phonation, and by timing the switch to falsetto to coincide with such consonants, we can prevent a voice crack from taking place. Consonants well suited for this include plosives like K, G, D, and so on, as well as any unvoiced consonant like S, F, and so on. With a bit of finesse, though, the trick can also be generalized to consonants that do not interrupt phonation, as we shall see in a bit. In the first phrase, however, we are singing the words 'twas grace, and so we can simply rely on the G in grace. 'Twas grace. To make it even easier, it can help to nudge the R in 'twas slightly in the direction of ah, and make sure you're singing on the open part of the vowels, so that you get 'twas grace and not 'twas grace. Also, because this is a breathy falsetto and more airflow is required, you may need to interrupt the legato for a quick breath in the middle of the phrase. This is okay, but try to keep the legato intact for the most part. Here we go. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear. One more time. 'Twas grace. Now for the second phrase, which goes like this. And grace my fears relieved. Two things to note here. First, the vowel a in and is somewhat trickier than the r in 'twas. To ameliorate this, it helps to make it slightly darker and more spacious, which is to say singing and instead of and. At any rate, it is important that you're singing on the vowel and not on the consonants. We want this, and grace, not this, and grace. Secondly, there is the high note, a D5 sung on an E vowel. Now, as some of you may remember from episode 5, my usual advice is to keep the E vowel somewhat narrow to facilitate more jaw separation. But because the pitch is so high, this is not necessary in this case. Getting the jaw separation is certainly still advisable, but keeping it narrow is unimportant. Instead, you should focus on making it very bright, so as to maintain its tonal consistency with the rest of the phrase. Let's try it. And grace my fears relieved. One more time. And grace. Next up, we have the third phrase, which goes like this. How precious did that grace appear. Here too, the high note is the most difficult part, but there's a trick we can use to make it a lot easier. Instead of singing precious, try singing precious with an air. It is also helpful to add a lot of mirth, though actually on this occasion we don't want a too large mouth opening, as it would increase the airflow beyond the already elevated amount required for a soft, breathy falsetto. A trick for finding this combination is to sing like you're in love, which will also help make the phrase feel more animated and musically interesting. But don't focus so much on that you forget to modify the word precious into precious. Here we go. How precious did that grace appear. One more time. How precious. Finally, we arrive at the fourth and last phrase. The hour that I first believed. Now, it may seem that this transition is going to be especially difficult because there is no consonant, and so we cannot use the consonant trick. But though it is not reflected accurately in the most commonplace phonetic transcriptions, the vowel E as it occurs in English actually does have a little J at the end. Interested viewers can check the description for a link to a video by Dr. Geoff Lindsey, where he explains this little bit of linguistic confusion. For our purposes today, however, it is enough to note that there is in fact a consonant there, which we can use for our transition. This, by the way, is generally true when singing in English, assuming you're not singing the two notes on the same syllable. The occurrence of two successive vowels without any intervening consonant is known in phonology as hiatus or diaeresis, which does not occur much in English. Instead, there is usually a J or W, or else a glottal stop is inserted. Thus, in practice, we almost always have the opportunity to use the consonant trick when wanting to disguise a switch from chest voice to falsetto. Let's try it. The hour that I first believed. One more time. The hour. And now that we've worked through all four phrases, let us try the whole verse. Now it will be especially important to be mindful of your breath. To avoid mishaps with lightheadedness, I recommend taking the liberty to interrupt each phrase halfway through for the sake of drawing in a quick breath. Also, to make it a little easier, we will start in a slightly lower key. Here we go. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the Now we will tackle it in the original key, but we will also bring in the first verse that we studied in the previous episode. If you did not watch it, you can just skip this part, or follow along using the lyrics on the screen if you're not sufficiently familiar with the song. Here we go. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour that I first believed. One more time. Amazing. And that's about it for today's video. If you have any questions, be sure to leave a comment down below. Stay tuned, remember to like and subscribe for more content, and as always, thanks for watching.